Real-time strategy has been declared dead more times than my villagers in Age of Empires, but somehow it keeps coming back swinging. And today we're ranking the greatest RTS games ever made, yes, including at least one pick that's guaranteed to start a small civil war in the comments. My name is Tom, this is LT Gaming, great to have you all here. Today we're tackling a proper heavyweight topic, the greatest RTS games of all time ranked. And I already know the comment section is going to have some strong opinions, so feel free to jump in with your own favourites down below. If you enjoy this sort of deep dive content, feel free to hit subscribe if you think we do a good job. Give the video a like, it does genuinely help the channel and this video get out there on the YouTube algorithm. Right, before we charge into this topic, here's how the list is going to work. First up, I'll be looking at impact and legacy. Did the game move the genre forward? Did it innovate? Is it still relevant today? Secondly, mechanical depth. Is it proper, thoughtful strategy, economy, tech, faction identity, all those good things you want from an RTS? Third will be fun factor and replayability. The memories it creates, the hours it eats, and the stories you end up telling years later. And finally, how it holds up today. Communities, mod support, re-releases, longevity, or just timeless design. And to keep it interesting, I'm only going to pick one game per franchise. Not because I don't own or love half the sequels on this list, but because otherwise it just will become a best-selling RTS series of all-time countdown. I'm choosing a single entry from each lineage that had the biggest impact across all these four lenses. And just to be transparent, I'll try to be impartial, but I've been playing RTS games since I could barely reach the keyboard, so yes, my own experience is going to creep in a bit. We all bring our own gaming history to these things. Alright, let's jump into it. So kicking off the list at number 20, the Battle for Middle-earth II, a game that finally let us command Middle-earth's greatest armies without needing a Peter Jackson budget. Now it might not be the deepest RTS on this list, but it absolutely nails the fantasy spectacle. Battle for Middle-earth II feels enormous, elven archers sending volleys across the forests, dwarves charging in with axes the size of tree trunks, Mordor flooding the map with orcs. It's chaotic in all the right ways. I think for me, compared to the first game, this is where the series opened up. Gone were the fixed base plots. Suddenly you could design your fortress the way you wanted, and I felt that each faction had proper personality too. You're not just picking a colour and a generic unit roster, you're picking a culture with its own rhythm, its own style, its own way of fighting. And then there's the War of the Ring, a brilliant hybrid of turn-based strategy in real-time battles that turns the entire map of Middle-earth into a playground. You would sweep across territories, clash at key choke points, and before you knew it was 1 AM and you're plotting a free front invasion of Mordor like it was perfectly reasonable behaviour. The standout feature for me was the heroes. They were absolute show stealers. Gandalf doesn't just pop in for moral support, he's deleting half a battalion with a lightning blast. Aragorn, the Witch King, they weren't just units, they were moment makers. So Battle for Middle-earth II earns this spot for sheer charm. It's not the most complex RTS you'll ever play, but it delivers atmosphere, fantasy flair, and those big memorable battles that stick with you. At number 19, we're heading to a galaxy far, far away, and specifically the one where Star Wars Empire at War quietly became one of the most modded RTS games ever made. The base game is solid, don't get me wrong, but the mods, they turn this into something genuinely special. This is the rare RTS where you're fighting a war in two layers, the galaxy map and the battlefield, and both feel properly connected. Take orbit, break their fleet, deploy your troops. Simple, clean, wonderfully Star Wars. Now it earns its spot here because scale is the real magic. You don't just build structures and queue units, you steer a galactic campaign. Fleets sweep across sectors, planets change hands, and every space victory earns you the right to invade. It's a really brilliant loop. But let's be honest, it is the modding community that pushes this into the top 20. Thrawn's Revenge, Fall of the Republic, massive overhauls, visual upgrades, AI tweaks. The sheer ambition of these projects is staggering. The standout feature for me is the space battles. Watching a Star Destroyer lumber into view while swarms of TIEs scream out of the hangar is peak RTS spectacle. And with the mods adding new ship classes, new mechanics and entire fleets, it's an absolute playground. So Empire at War earns this spot because it's more than a game, it's a platform, a canvas the community has spent nearly 20 years expanding, refining and celebrating. If the base game built the skeleton, the modders gave it a soul. At number 18 we've got Cossacks III, the only RTS where saying I'll build a few more units somehow ends with 10,000 musketeers standing shoulder to shoulder, and this one is a revival of that classic early 2000s formula, and it absolutely leans into what made the originals brilliant: huge armies, booming economies, and enough artillery fire to make your monitor tremble. Cossacks III is unapologetically old school, and that's exactly its charm. You're building a proper economy with dozens of workers, managing a massive production chain, and expanding across huge maps while trying not to bankrupt yourself on musket ammunition. And I gotta say, the standout feature here is again the scale. Nothing else hits this level outside of a few titles. Cossacks III lets you field forces in the literal thousands. And when an RTS makes your PC sweat and your inner general grin like a maniac, you know you're onto something. It sits at this spot because it's carrying forward a very specific, very beloved flavour of RTS. Huge numbers, huge maps, and huge spectacle. It's pure old school strategic chaos, and sometimes that's exactly what you want. Now at number 17 we've got Age of Mythology, the moment Ensemble Studios looked at Age of Empires and said, you know what this needs? Gods, monsters, and the ability to smite someone with a literal meteor shower, and honestly they were absolutely right. It's on this list because it takes that classic Age formula and adds a brilliant mythological twist. You're not just building villages and marching through the ages, you're pledging yourself to gods, choosing minor deities for unique bonuses, and unlocking myth units that bring proper punch. The variety is fantastic. Greeks rely on heroes and legendary beasts, the Egyptians channel divine favour through temples and monuments, and the Norse, they generate resources by fighting. Very Nordic of them. And the campaign, honestly, it's one of my all-time favourites. Proper story, genuinely gripping characters, and globe-spanning set pieces. It's RTS storytelling done right. One of the standout points for me here were the god powers. Everyone remembers their first meteor swarm, Bolt of Zeus, Earthquake. They weren't tiny tactical nudges, they were full-on moment makers. And the love didn't stop there. The Titans expansion added a whole new civilization and some of the most dramatic units in the series. Then they had the extended edition that brought it to modern PCs, and now Age of Mythology Retold is giving it the proper revival it deserves. Age of Mythology earns its place because it's bold, imaginative, and endlessly charming. At number 16 we've got Empire Earth, the RTS equivalent of saying, yeah, I'll just play a quick match, and suddenly you find yourself commanding laser firing mechs because the game has gone from the Stone Age to the Nano Age, all while you were having a nice cuppa. This isn't just an RTS that covers a slice of history, it covers all of it, and then just keeps going to see what happens. It earns its spot because it's ambitious in a way few RTS games ever dared to be. You start with little villages poking around the prehistoric world, and by the end you're running a futuristic military industrial complex, building orbital bombers and deploying cyborg infantry. 14 epochs, all transforming your tech units, economy, tactics. It's a proper journey. The standout feature in this game has to be the progression through the ages. It doesn't just upgrade your units, it reshapes your entire strategic landscape. Every age feels like a proper milestone, and every tech jump forces you to adapt. It sits at this spot because it's bold, sprawling, and gloriously over the top. It's messy at times, sure, but it's part of the charm for me. No other RTS gives you this sense of marching through thousands of years of civilization in one breathless match. At number 15 we've got World in Conflict, the RTS that took one look at base building, politely declined, and said let's get straight to explosions, and honestly, sometimes that's exactly what you want. This is Cold War gone hot. Soviet armour rolling through Europe and the US, with you dropped in the mayhem armed with a reinforcement budget and a commander who seems like on the edge of a breakdown. Now it earns its spot here because it's frontline decision making at its best. No economy, no tech tree, no 20-minute turtling up, just sharp combined arms warfare where positioning, teamwork and timing decide everything. Now technically you got me, this leans more into real-time tactics and classic RTS, but that is part of its legacy. World in Conflict opened the door for modern tactical heavyweights like Broken Arrow, Warno, Steel Division, and it proved that stripping out base building doesn't reduce depth, it sharpens the whole experience. A standout feature for me here is the escalation system. Early on you're calling in smoke, artillery and napalm. By late game you're unleashing tactical nukes like you're trying to end the Cold War single-handedly. Every support call feels weighty. It sits at this spot because it's sharp, dramatic, and it was way ahead of its time. It takes the RTS battlefield and turns it into a proper cinematic arena. At number 14, we've got old school Dungeon Keeper, the RTS that let us finally embrace our inner villain with absolutely no shame whatsoever. No shining armor or noble quests, you're slapping imps, building torture chambers, and doing your best to be a deeply unethical underground landlord. It's Bullfrog at its cheekiest, dark humour, gleefully evil design, and a narrator who sounds absolutely epic. Dungeon Keeper flipped the RTS formula on its head. Instead of erecting a noble city, you're carving out an underground monstrosity, digging tunnels, laying traps and managing creatures with some creative HR policies. And it didn't just entertain, it inspired an entire subgenre. Evil Genius, War for the Overworld, Dungeons, they all trace their DNA back to this magical slice of villainy. Now a standout feature for me was the possession spell. Being able to drop into first person and wander around your dungeon through the eyes of a beetle, a troll or anything else you hatched was pure gold. I was absolutely terrible at commanding my troops this way, but I loved wandering through my own layers, hacking down the odd chicken, or instigating a cheeky fight between my minions. Dungeon Keeper's on this list because it's creative, mischievous, and unlike anything else in this genre still to this day. At number 13, we're going right back to where it all began, Dune II. Yes, there were earlier experiments like Herzog Zwei or Megalomania, but this is the game that actually introduced real-time strategy to the masses. It's ancient, clunky, and absolutely vital. Westwood basically took a loose collection of ideas, refined them, and delivered the first recognizable modern RTS. 3 factions, base building, harvesting, tech progression, fog of war, mission structure. A whole blueprint for future RTSs. It's on this list because it has the DNA for everything that followed. It was basically the skeleton key for Command & Conquer, Warcraft, StarCraft, and most of the genre at large. It's fascinating at how many RTS conventions debuted here and never really changed. Economy loops, super weapons, reinforcement pacing, even those little unit voice acknowledgements. One of the standout features, if I had to pick one, was the spice economy. It was slow and nerve-wracking as your harvester waddled back with a belly full of that wealth, and it created tension long before esports existed. Resource gathering wasn't passive, it was a risk, and that was revolutionary. Now Dune II isn't here because it's still up there with the modern RTSs, it's here because without it the genre as we know would look very different. This is the spark that lit the fire, everything above it stands on this game's shoulders. At number 12 we've got Stronghold, the RTS where you spend half your time building a glorious medieval castle and the other half dealing with peasants complaining about cheese rations, tax rates and wolves you probably should have cleared earlier on. Stronghold is on this list because it blends city building with RTS warfare better than just about anything else. Your castle isn't a generic base, it's a handcrafted fortress. Every tower, gatehouse, kill zone, every stretch of wall is placed by you. When the enemy turns up with ladders and trebuchets, the layout you created actually matters. When it comes to siege warfare, it's glorious. Archers raining arrows down from battlements, boiling oil splashing down on climbers, catapults hurling boulders. Proper glorious stuff. The standout feature for me here was the ability to design your own castle from the ground up. No other RTS really captures that same pride of creation. That feeling when your fortress stands firm against a full assault and you think, yeah, I built that and it bloody works. Stronghold sits on this list because it nails a distinct identity. Part management sim, part RTS, part medieval storybook. With the modernized versions, you can still enjoy this game today and it stands on par with any RTS out there. At number 11, we've got Company of Heroes, the World War II RTS that didn't just show you a battlefield, it dragged you into it. Every bullet, every crater, every ruined farmhouse feels like it's got some weight behind it. Relic didn't just make a strategy game here, they made a war film that you can control. Company Heroes changed how RTS battles worked. It was about positioning, cover, suppression, flanking, combined arms. You had to make proper tactical decision making, where if you pulled things off it could flip an entire engagement. The resource system was kinda cool too, you fought for the map, fuel, ammunition, manpower. If you're not out there capturing territory, you're losing. RTS suddenly became a tug of war rather than a base sitting contest. And I think the destruction system still looks brilliant. Buildings crumble, walls blow apart, battlefields fill with craters that become improvised cover. The whole map evolves as the fight drags on. The standout feature though was the cover system. Simple on the surface, green, yellow, red shields, but absolutely transformative. Firefights became tactical puzzles, suppress, flank, smoke, push. It gave skirmishes a little narrative of its own. It sits on this list because it proved RTS could be cinematic without losing any depth. It felt tense and tactical, the kind of game where victories feel earned and defeats stick with you because you knew what you did wrong. Alright, getting into the top 10, we've got Rise of Nations next. A game that looked at civilization, looked at traditional RTS and decided, yep, let's fuse those two together and somehow make it work, and remarkably it did. This is strategy on a grand scale, but without the slow pacing of 4X. It's all happening in real time and it is wonderfully addictive. Rise of Nations blends big picture strategy with proper RTS fundamentals. You've got national borders, attrition, city building, wonders, and even a bloody good tech tree. It has full 8 ages to advance through, from ancient spearmen to stealth bombers. The territory system also changes completely how you play. Cross too far into enemy lands without supply and your units would melt. Hold your borders well and you can choke an opponent before they even get going. The age progression was pretty cool too. Every age felt like a proper milestone, shifting your economy, unlocking new tactics, and changing how you approach fights. For me though, the one that made this stand out was those territory borders. They were the glue that made everything click, turning map control into a living resource and making every expansion, fort and frontier battle matter. It sits in this spot because it delivered breadth without bloat. It was clever, cleanly designed and fast enough to stay exciting and still deep enough to stay engaging. It's really for me the gold standard for hybrid strategy. Number 9, we've got a personal favourite of mine, Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War. The first RTS that made 40k actually look and feel as brutal as it does in the lore. This game brought two massive innovations together, squad based infantry and map control economy. Instead of babysitting individual units, you're commanding squads with morale, upgrades and tech paths. Losing one isn't just a setback, it was a gut punch. And the requisition point system kept every match moving. No sitting in a corner building a secret tank fortress. You have to take ground, hold it, bleed for it, and every inch of the map mattered. Then there was stuff like the animation work, sync kills, brutal melee takedowns, orcs screaming like they're auditioning for a metal band. It was the most alive the Warhammer universe had ever looked in a video game at the time. And if you wanted single player, Dark Crusade still remains one of the best non-linear RTS campaigns ever made. And the community kept this thing alive beautifully. Massive overhauls like Ultimate Apocalypse mod, HD texture packs, balance fixes, AI upgrades. There was a whole ecosystem of modders still polishing and expanding and reimagining this game. Now the definitive edition has infused new life back into it. I had to pick one standout feature. For me it was the morale system. If you broke a squad's will, the whole line would collapse. Watching a unit panic or rally at just the right moment gave engagements real drama. Dawn of War earns this spot because it's the complete package. Cinematic, tactical, endlessly replayable, and lovingly maintained by the community. It defined what a 40k RTS should feel like, and no one has topped that flavour ever since. Now at number 8 we've got Rome Total War, the game that took the Total War formula and blew it wide open. Suddenly you weren't just pushing units around, you were running a Roman dynasty, politicking on the campaign map, then diving straight into these enormous battles. Rome delivered scope and spectacle like nothing else at the time. Massive 3D clashes, legionaries trading blows, and elephants causing absolute mayhem. It just felt huge. And that seamless jump from grand strategy into real-time strategy battles became the series' signature. I still remember being stunned the first time a general launched into a pre-battle speech. I stopped everything just to listen, and the mod scene has kept this game alive for years. There are countless mods that turn Rome into a proper historical playground, and the updated versions make it easy to revisit the game even now. Now, the standout feature with this game, and indeed the series, is the campaign to battle transition. One moment you're making power moves on the map, the next you're in the thick of a clash worthy of a film set. Rome earns its place on this list because it redefined what a historical RTS could be, big, bold, and endlessly replayable. At number 7 we've got Total Annihilation, the RTS that turned up in '97 and casually did half the things modern strategy games still show off about today. Physics-based projectiles, terrain that matters, hundreds of units fighting at once, TA was doing it all. Now it's on this list because of scale and systems. Artillery shells arc, collide with hills, wreckage litters the battlefield and can be reclaimed. Your whole economy flows continuously through metal and energy. You weren't just moving units, you were orchestrating a full multi-front war across land, air and sea. Now the standout feature was the commander, equal parts builder, warrior and giant walking you lose button. Use him well and he's brilliant. Misplay him and he explodes like a small sun. It was an incredible bit of tension baked right into the core design. For me though, I gotta say this is pure childhood nostalgia. Luke and I used to battle it out constantly. I go straight for his economy, sniping his constructors, stealing expansions, the lot. Sibling warfare at its absolute finest. And to be perfectly honest with you, TA didn't just innovate, it spawned a million imitations. Supreme Commander is the obvious heir, but then you've got community driven marvels like Zero K, Beyond All Reason, and numerous others, tracing their design DNA straight back to this game. It sits on this list because Total Annihilation was wildly ahead of its time and still feels fresh today. It laid the foundations for massive scale RTS, and the genre's never really shaken off its influence in the best way possible. At number 6 we've got Command & Conquer Red Alert 2, and it was really tough to pick one from this franchise. But it's a game that's so confidently ridiculous, stylish, and instantly recognisable that it basically became the poster child for a classic RTS. Now it earns its spot here because it strikes the perfect balance between accessibility and tactical chaos. Economy is clean, units are bold and distinct, and battles explode into glorious nonsense without ever feeling too noisy. You always know what's going on, even when a dozen Tesla coils are firing like someone plugged a map into the national grid. The faction design is brilliant. Prism tanks, Chronotech, Mirage tanks on one side, Rhinos, Desolators. Whatever it is, it's asymmetric, it's playful, and matches feel like tipping a toy box onto the carpet. The standout feature for me is the Command & Conquer attitude is dialed up to 11. Frank Klapaki's soundtrack, the wonderfully camp FMV cast, and I've got to give a special mention here to Udo Kier, who played Yuri with such magnificently unhinged energy. He very sadly passed away recently, but his performance remains one of the most iconic villain turns in RTS history. Red Alert 2 earns this place because it's pure, unfiltered fun, without sacrificing clarity or depth. It has a lot of replayability, it's instantly readable, and it's just dripping with style and vibe. It was Westwood, I think, at their boldest, a classic RTS through and through. At number 5 we've got Supreme Commander Forged Alliance, the RTS that took the Total Annihilation formula and pushed it to the logical extreme. Huge maps, sprawling armies, and a sense of scale that still feels unmatched today. Forged Alliance is all about commanding a true war. Land, air, and naval forces moving across kilometers of terrain. And that strategic zoom is still one of the smartest bits of RTS design ever made. One moment you're watching a small skirmish, then next you're viewing the entire conflict as if you're sat at the command table. The flowing mass and energy economy rewards planning and long-term thinking, rather than panic clicking. And of course the experimentals, Monkey Lords, Fat Boys, Colossi are the sort of late game centerpieces that gives the battles real weight. And thanks to the Forged Alliance Forever community, it's never faded. Balance patches, matchmaking, bug fixes, the game's still thriving because nothing quite captures that level of scale and clarity even today. It sits at number 5 because Forged Alliance is the definitive large-scale RTS, deep, demanding and engineered for players who love big picture strategy, and nothing's really surpassed it. At number 4 we've got Warcraft III, the game that fused RTS with RPG elements so naturally it felt like the genre had been waiting for it. Heroes, items, creeping, leveling, suddenly your army had actual backbone and every fight mattered. It earned this spot because heroes define the whole experience. A single well-played Blade Master or Archmage can carry an early fight, snowball a lead and pull off a clutch comeback. It added momentum and personality that you don't get anywhere else in the RTS space. The faction design is brilliant too, humans, orcs, undead, night elves, all distinct, all viable, all dripping with flavour. And the creeping system gave every match a proper rhythm. Early game skirmishes, mid game power spikes and late game pushes where big ultimates come online. And of course the custom map scene changed gaming forever. Dota, League of Legends, half of modern MOBAs and survival landscape games started in this engine. Now, my bread and butter growing up was Warcraft II, so it hurts not to put it here for this franchise. But if I'm trying to be fully fair and impartial here, Warcraft III is the peak of the series critically, and I loved it just as much in its own way. So Warcraft III earns this place because it rewired the RTS formula and its influence still echoes across the industry today. Bold, inventive, packed with identity, and to be honest, it's just iconic. Coming in at number 3, we've got Homeworld, the RTS that proves space strategy could be beautiful, haunting, and properly three-dimensional. Most games pretend to be 3D. Homeworld actually was. Full spherical movement, verticality, and battles unfolding in every direction. It's the atmosphere that hits you first here. That minimalist UI, the ship designs, the slow acceleration of fighters launching from a carrier, and of course Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings, welcoming you into one of the most memorable openings in RTS history. The story is superb too, a full space opera told through stark, painterly cutscenes and understated voice work. It's surprisingly emotional, and losing ships feels like losing people, not just pixels. The game also brought serious tactical depth from the 3D movement and formation plays. Positioning, elevation, and approach vectors matter in a way no other RTS has really matched. And honestly, in terms of pure space RTS design, nothing else has really come close apart from its own sequels, excluding Homeworld 3 of course. The standout feature here is that fully 3D battle space. Once you learn to think in all directions, it clicks, and you realise how far ahead of its time this game was. It sits at number 3 because Homeworld is timeless, atmospheric, mechanically sharp, and still today the benchmark for space RTS design. And no one's really recreated this exact feeling ever since. At number 2, we've got StarCraft II: Wings of Liberty, the game that refined competitive RTS to a razor's edge. 3 races, 3 completely different playstyles, and somehow it all balances out across tens of thousands of pro matches. It's design alchemy. Each faction feels like their own discipline. Terran with their drops and mobility, Protoss with big tech spikes and warpins, Zerg spreading creep and swarming the map. Whether you're Bronze League or watching GSL gods hit 400 actions per minute, the game had this clarity and pace that nothing else has really matched. The campaign deserves massive credit too, varied missions, strong characters, and some brilliant set pieces. It's Blizzard storytelling woven into rock solid mission design. And outside of the main game, the custom maps and co-op modes kept the whole ecosystem alive for many years. Arcade games, tower defenses, RPG maps, it was a platform, not just a campaign and a ladder. The standout feature is the asymmetry. No one else has quite nailed it as much as these guys have. 3 factions that barely share units or mechanics, yet remain balanced at every level of play. It's one of the most impressive feats in RTS history. It sits at number 2 because it's the definitive competitive RTS. Fast, demanding, elegant, and still electrifying to watch or play. No one's matched this precise flavour ever since. And at number 1, a drum roll please, it could only be Age of Empires II, a game that survived 4 eras of PC hardware, multiple remasters, dozens of expansions, and it's still one of the best strategy experiences you can play today. The brilliance here is in its clarity, a clean economy, readable unit counters, and civilization design that's deep without being overwhelming. And there's over 40 civs now, all viable, all with their own flavour, and it's absurd how well this game scales given its age. The matches have that perfect rhythm, scout early, boom smartly, pressure where it matters, transition into late game siege juggernaut. Your decisions echo throughout your play and nothing feels fiddly or overcomplicated. The definitive edition has breathed life back into it. New civs, new campaigns, better pathfinding, co-op modes, rank ladders, mod support. It's not just nostalgia propping this up. It is a self-contained entity at this point with constant updates. On a personal note, I still remember opening up Age of Empires II, when it was called Age of Kings, for Christmas. Luke unwrapped Star Siege Tribes the same day, and school never stood a chance. AoE 2 became part of my gaming DNA, and it's still one I return to with the same exact excitement. So why did I put this at number 1? It earned the crown for me because it is timeless. It's approachable, and I think endlessly replayable. It has deep strategy, and it's still evolving to this day. For me, it is the gold standard of RTS, and sadly probably always will be in my mind.